My name is James Clark, and on the day I thought I'd proudly walk my daughter down the aisle, she looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, you're not invited. Go away." Imagine giving 25 years of your life, every dollar, every sacrifice, only to be cast aside like a stranger. I stood there in the doorway, holding the gift I had wrapped myself, realizing in that moment that the little girl I had raised was gone, replaced by someone who no longer saw me as family. But what she didn't know was that within hours, her perfect wedding would crumble piece by piece, not out of revenge, but out of justice. Before we begin, let me ask you, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories like this. I can still hear the words echoing as if the marble walls of that ballroom carved them into stone. "Dad, you weren't invited. Go away." My daughter Emily said it with a voice tight as glass, sharp enough to cut, cold enough to freeze a lifetime of memories in an instant. The crowd around her didn't breathe. Guests in their designer gowns and $1,000 suits turned toward me, their curiosity sharpened into judgment. I stood there, still clutching the small gift box I had wrapped myself, the paper creased from the ride in my truck, the ribbon tied by my own calloused hands. For a moment, I didn't move. I had spent months picturing this day. In my mind, I had rehearsed how it might feel to see her walk down the aisle, radiant in white, knowing that I had built the foundation for her happiness. Yet instead, the daughter I raised alone after her mother died stared at me as though I were an intruder. I wanted to tell her that everything surrounding her, the flowers from Ecuador, the ballroom dripping with chandeliers, the string quartet, existed only because I had said yes to every demand. But I swallowed my words because it wasn't pride that clenched my chest. It was grief. The silence in the room broke when Michael, her groom, stepped forward. His tuxedo was cut sharp, his smile practiced. "Mr. Clark, I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, but the steel in his voice made it clear there was no misunderstanding at all. He wanted me gone. Emily's eyes darted nervously to the guests who were already whispering into champagne flutes. Her cheeks burned not with shame at what she was doing to me, but with embarrassment that her father didn't fit the world she was marrying into. "Immediate family only," she added quickly, her voice wobbling. Those words hit harder than anything Michael could have said. Immediate family. I had been her only parent since she was 3 years old. I had read her bedtime stories until she fell asleep on my chest, sat in the front row, at every play worked double shifts to afford private school tuition, and now, with a single sentence, she erased all of it. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat tightened. All I could manage was, "Sweetheart, it's your wedding day. I only wanted to congratulate you both." My words fell into the silence like stones into water, sinking without a ripple. The band kept playing oblivious while my world collapsed. I set the gift box gently on the nearest table beside untouched glasses of champagne. The ribbon caught the light of the chandelier as though mocking the moment. My daughter's green eyes, once so full of trust, hardened into river stones that refused to meet mine. "You're right," I said finally, my voice quiet but steady. "I don't belong here." And with that, I turned every step away from her, feeling like a mile. Behind me, whispers rose like a tide. Someone laughed, brittle and false. My polished work boots struck the marble floor in rhythm with my heartbeat, each one heavier than the last. But as I reached the doorway, a strange calm settled over me. She had dismissed me, yes, but she had no idea what it truly meant to push me aside. The wedding would go on without me, but not for long. As I stepped out of that ballroom, the spring air struck me like a slap across the face, sharp and sobering. Behind me, the music played on, muffled by heavy doors, as if nothing had happened. Yet inside my chest, something broke that no orchestra could ever drown out. My daughter had told me I didn't belong, and for the first time, I wondered if she had truly believed it all along. I stood on the steps, giftless now, staring at the parking lot filled with luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, Bentleys, all lined up neatly like soldiers in formation. My own pickup truck sat alone at the far corner, mud still clinging to its tires. It looked out of place, and in that moment, so did I. But as I walked toward it, memories came flooding back, crowding out the sting of humiliation with the ache of old love. I remembered Emily at 5 years old, her tiny hand wrapped around mine as we walked to the park. "Push me higher, Daddy," she had shouted from the swing, laughter bubbling like music sweeter than any wedding quartet. I had pushed until my arms ached, and when she soared into the sky, her giggles carried across the playground. She trusted me, then believed I could send her flying safely, that no matter how high she went, I'd be there to catch her if she fell. I remembered her first recital when she tripped on stage and froze, tears brimming. My calloused hands clapped louder than anyone's willing her to keep going. She did. And afterward, she had thrown her arms around me, whispering, "I did it because you were watching Daddy." That little girl, the one who believed I was her anchor. Where had she gone? The memories were warm, but their contrast to the present burned cold. That same girl had grown into a woman who saw me as an embarrassment. A man who built his life in steel-toed boots and sweat-stained shirts was no longer good enough for her ballroom filled with people who measured worth in pedigrees and last names. I slid into the cab of my truck, the seat worn and cracked from years of use, and rested my hands on the steering wheel. My fingers trembled not from weakness, but from the rage that followed grief. It wasn't loud, theatrical rage. It was quiet, controlled, the kind that builds foundations and tears them down just as easily. I thought of Sarah, my wife, taken by cancer, before Emily was old enough to tie her own shoes. I had promised her on her deathbed that Emily would never go without, that I would give her everything. I kept that promise, every cent, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, spent worrying about tuition bills and mortgage payments. I had kept it for 25 years. And what was my reward? To be told I didn't belong. To be erased from my own daughter's wedding as though I were some hired help who had overstayed his welcome. The pain of that truth sat heavy in my chest, but beneath it something else stirred. A resolve steady and unshakable. She had taken my presence for granted. She had mistaken sacrifice for weakness. But she was about to learn that the man she dismissed wasn't finished yet. The parking lot stretched before me like a battlefield, silent, except for the wind carrying the faint smell of imported flowers from the venue. My boots crunched against the gravel as I walked toward my truck, each step heavier than the last, but steadier too. I had been cast out, humiliated in front of strangers, yet strangely I felt more alive than I had in years. From where I stood, I could still see the Gothic spires of the hall stabbing into the sky. Inside, the chandeliers glittered, the champagne flowed, and the guests whispered about the uninvited father who had been dismissed. I knew exactly what they saw when they looked at me. Rough hands, weathered face, a man more at home on a construction site than in a ballroom. They didn't see the years I'd carried on my shoulders, the nights I had chosen Emily's college fund over my own retirement, the months I'd lived lean so she could live lavish. No, to them, I was just the outsider who had stumbled into their perfect tableau. I leaned against my truck, breathing in the cool March air. The sky was shifting, darker clouds rolling in from the horizon, promising rain before the night was over. Somehow, it felt fitting. I slid into the driver's seat, the cab wrapping around me like old armor. My dashboard clock glowed 3:47 p.m., plenty of time before the banks closed. My phone buzzed with missed calls from my lawyer about some pending property dispute, but I scrolled past them, There was a different number I needed now, one I hadn't touched in months, but suddenly mattered more than anything. I pulled up the contact First National Bank Business Services. My thumb hovered over the call button. For 25 years, I had given without question. But standing outside that venue, hearing my daughter's words repeat in my mind, I realized giving had turned into enabling. She didn't just forget gratitude, she came to expect my sacrifice like it was her birthright. And Michael, he had married not a woman, but a lifestyle I had built, brick by brick. Well, it was time to remind them both where that lifestyle came from, and how easily it could be taken away. The phone rang once, and a woman's voice answered. "First National, this is Patricia speaking. How may I assist you?" I straightened my voice, calm, deliberate, the same tone I used negotiating million-dollar contracts. "Patricia, this is James Clark. Account number 779512. I need to initiate stop payments on several authorized transactions." There was a pause, then the soft clatter of keys. "Of course, Mr. Clark. Can you verify your social security number and mother's maiden name?" As I provided the information, I stared through my windshield at the luxury vehicles parked near the entrance. None of their owners had any idea what was about to unfold. Patricia came back on the line. "Which transactions, specifically all wedding-related payments?" I said evenly. "Venue, rental, catering deposit, floral arrangements, photography, music services, every last one. Sir, these are significant amounts. Are you certain about stopping all payments?" I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. My daughter had told me I didn't belong. It was time to show her what life looked like without me. "I'm completely certain." Patricia's keyboard clicks filled the silence as I recited authorization codes from memory. 25 years of running Clark Construction had trained me to remember every number that mattered. Contract values, vendor accounts, payroll deadlines. Numbers never lied. They told the story of sacrifice more clearly than words ever could. "Stop payments are now in effect," Patricia finally confirmed. "You'll receive confirmation numbers shortly. Is there anything else I can assist you with today?" I exhaled slowly, steadying the anger that simmered beneath my ribs. "No, Patricia. That will cover it." As the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the darkened windshield. My face looked older than I remembered, creases from years of labor, silver threads in my hair. But behind my eyes burned a resolve that hadn't dimmed with age. Emily had dismissed me like I was nothing. She was about to learn that the man she cast aside wasn't powerless. He was the very foundation beneath her world, and I had just pulled the first support beam away. I scrolled through my contacts again and tapped another number. "Elegant Affairs Catering, Marcus speaking," came the cheerful voice on the line. "Marcus, this is James Clark. I'm calling about the Anderson wedding reception happening right now." "Yes, Mr. Clark. Everything is going beautifully. The guests are raving about the appetizers. I'm afraid there's been a financial complication. Payment authorization has been revoked, effective immediately." Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you saying?" "I suggest you protect your equipment and remaining food service. The bank has stopped payment on your contract. You'll want to speak with the wedding party about alternative arrangements." Marcus didn't argue. He knew business. Within seconds, he hung up, no doubt already mobilizing his staff. Next came the florist. "Bellingham Blooms, Susan speaking. Payment has been canceled. You'll need to collect your arrangements if you want to salvage any value." "But the orchids are integrated into the entire design," she protested. "Business is business, Susan. Move quickly." Her breath hitched, but she understood. In my world, hesitation meant loss. Call after call, I moved with precision: photographer, musicians, linen rental, even the lighting technician. Each conversation ended the same way, panic on the other end, calm finality in my voice. By 4:15, my phone showed the last call completed. I leaned back in the seat, silence wrapping around me like armor. Outside the windshield, I saw a white van pulling into the service entrance. Catering staff, smart men. They weren't going to lose more than they had to. Inside that ballroom, my daughter was still glowing in silk and pearls, greeting guests laughing with her groom. She had no idea the world beneath her feet was already shifting. Within minutes, her dream would unravel, not because of spite, but because actions have consequences. And for the first time in her life, Emily was about to face them. I gripped the steering wheel, steady and unyielding. She told me I didn't belong. Soon she'd understand just how much I had always belonged and how much it cost to cast me aside. Through the windshield of my truck, I watched the first signs of disruption ripple through the pristine order of that wedding. The catering van parked crooked near the side entrance, Marcus climbing out with a face set like stone. Behind him, his staff, hurried voices, sharp movements, urgent. They didn't look like celebratory servers anymore. They looked like men pulling salvage from a sinking ship. I knew what was coming next. Weddings like skyscrapers depend on foundation. Remove the base, and the walls collapse. I had just yanked the foundation out from under Emily's perfect day. I imagined her still inside, smiling for photographs, her gown glowing beneath chandeliers. She had no idea the orchids she adored were about to be stripped from the tables, no idea her gourmet dinner would never reach the guests, no idea the string quartet would soon silence their bows mid-note. I had given her that dream, funded every drop of champagne. And now, with one decision, I had taken it back. My phone buzzed again, Emily's name flashing across the screen. For the 10th time that afternoon, I let it ring. She had never called me so many times in a row in her life, not unless she needed money. The irony wasn't lost on me. The girl who told me I didn't belong at her wedding was now desperate for my presence, if only to fix the financial storm I had unleashed. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I thought of Sarah again. The promise I'd made to her on that hospital bed, her frail hand clutching mine. Take care of our little girl, James. I had taken it to heart. I had worked myself raw so Emily never went without. I gave her not just what she needed, but what she wanted. Designer clothes, private school, BMWs, even this lavish wedding she had turned into a monument of status. I had kept that promise. But Sarah never asked me to let Emily grow spoiled. Never asked me to build her into a woman who would one day dismiss her own father as unworthy. That part was on me. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. This wasn't about revenge, it was about correction. A lifetime of unconditional giving had created entitlement. Now justice meant allowing her to feel the weight of responsibility she had avoided. If that required dismantling her wedding piece by piece, so be it. By 4:20, I saw another vehicle pull in Bellingham Blooms. Susan stepped out, flanked by 2 assistants carrying plastic tubs. She didn't hesitate, didn't waste words. She moved with the precision of someone who understood contracts better than sentiment. In minutes, her orchids would be stripped from Emily's altar, the petals that symbolized perfection, packed away like unsold merchandise. I leaned back in my seat, exhaling slow. The marble floors would soon echo with confusion, then panic, then shame. Emily had wanted me gone. She had made it clear I didn't belong. What she didn't realize was that I belonged to every inch of that wedding more than anyone else in that ballroom. And by sundown, every guest would see it too. The first fracture in Emily's perfect day came not from raised voices, but from silence, the kind that falls when confusion sweeps a room. Through the ballroom's tall windows, I could just make out the florist's assistants, marching in their arms, full of empty plastic tubs. Susan, the owner of Bellingham Blooms, led the charge with the grim efficiency of a surgeon. Inside, Emily was still radiant, her dress flowing as she accepted congratulations from relatives who had no idea what was brewing. But her smile faltered the moment she saw Susan heading directly toward the altar, eyes locked on the towering arrangement of imported white orchids. Guests turned their heads puzzled as the assistants began dismantling the centerpiece in full view of everyone. "Excuse me," Emily said, stepping forward with the polished composure she had perfected in Michael's world. "We're in the middle of our reception. Whatever you need, it can wait until later." Her tone carried the authority of someone used to staff obeying her requests. Susan didn't flinch. She pulled a bundle of orchids free, holding them like evidence in a trial. "Ma'am, I'm Susan from Bellingham Blooms. Payment authorization for these arrangements was canceled 40 minutes ago. I'm here to recover our property." The words struck Emily like a blow. She forced a laugh, thin and brittle. "That's impossible. Everything was paid for weeks ago." "Not anymore," Susan replied flatly. "The account holder, James Clark, revoked every payment. I have written authorization to collect our arrangements." For a heartbeat, the ballroom froze. The quartet played on uncertainly, their notes hanging awkward in the tense air. Then came the whispers, sharp-pointed, unavoidable. "That's the father, isn't it?" someone murmured. "Didn't she just tell him to leave?" another asked. "Good Lord, he paid for everything." The weight of 100 eyes fell on Emily. Her cheeks drained of color, her confident composure cracking under the pressure. She reached for Michael's hand, but he stood rigid, jaw tightening as if holding back his own eruption. Susan and her assistants moved swiftly, stripping orchids from the altar, sweeping table centerpieces into tubs. Each flower removed was like a piece of Emily's facade being peeled away. Guests exchanged looks over half-empty champagne glasses, the scent of expensive orchids now clashing with the unmistakable odor of scandal. Michael finally stormed forward, voice raised. "What exactly is happening here?" Susan didn't back down. "Payment issues, sir. We're collecting unpaid merchandise." "This is completely unacceptable," Michael snapped. "Get your manager on the phone immediately. I am the manager." Susan replied, her tone clipped and unwavering. "Our contract clearly states that canceled payments void service obligations. These arrangements are our property until full payment clears." And it hasn't. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emily's eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for an escape, but there was none. The flowers that symbolized purity and elegance were being carted away like repossessed goods. Her fairy tale was unraveling petal by petal. I watched from my truck, steady as stone. She had told me I didn't belong. Now surrounded by stripped tables and questioning eyes, she was realizing the truth. I had belonged to every detail of that wedding, more than she ever would. If the flowers being hauled out shocked the guests, the next blow shattered the illusion completely. It came from the very heart of a wedding reception, the food. Elegant affairs, catering, had been Emily's pride. She insisted on their reputation, their artistry, their price tag, that made my stomach tighten when I first signed the contract. But nothing silences a ballroom faster than hungry guests realizing dinner isn't coming. The first sign was subtle. Staff in crisp black uniforms, who just moments earlier floated between tables with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, suddenly froze. Their cheerful smiles vanished, replaced by uncertain whispers and darting glances toward the side doors. Then Marcus, the catering manager, marched in with 3 employees at his heels. He carried no trays, only a clipboard clutched tightly in his hands. "Ma'am," he said firmly, stopping near Emily and Michael. "I'm afraid we need to cease service immediately." Emily blinked, her face pale, her smile cracking like porcelain. "Excuse me," The main course hasn't even been served. Surely you can wait until Marcus shook his head. Payment authorization was revoked at 4:15. We are contractually obligated to protect our equipment and remaining inventory. We can't continue without payment. The guests erupted in low murmurs, tension sweeping across the ballroom like wildfire. Plates clinked as servers began covering stations with white cloths, extinguishing the smell of roasted duck and prime rib before it ever reached the tables. The sound of champagne corks popping was replaced by uneasy coughs and the rustle of silk gowns shifting uncomfortably. Michael's face flushed red as he stepped forward, his voice sharp enough to pierce the hush. "This is my wedding reception. You can't just stop service in the middle of an event." "Sir, we can and we must." Marcus replied calmly, his professionalism cutting deeper than anger could. "When authorization is canceled, our standard procedure requires immediate asset protection. My staff will be retrieving all food equipment and supplies now." Emily clutched Michael's arm, her voice breaking. "There's been a mistake. My father, he wouldn't do this." But even as she spoke, doubt flickered across her eyes. The realization crept in slow and crushing that maybe I would. That maybe the man she dismissed as unworthy still held the strings she had been dancing on for years. From my truck, I saw Marcus's team wheel out carts piled with half-prepared entrees, stainless steel trays gleaming under the lights. Guests gasped as the aroma of their dinner was whisked away. A child began to cry at one table. At another, a woman fanned herself nervously, whispering, "Can you believe this?" Michael turned on Emily, his whisper harsh but audible to those closest. "What kind of arrangement did your family make?" His words carried accusation, suspicion, the first cracks in a marriage barely hours old. Emily's lips trembled. I don't know. Everything was supposed to be handled. Handled. That was always the word. I had handled her life for 25 years. Now, for the first time, she was being asked to handle it herself, and she couldn't. Inside that ballroom, orchids vanished, food disappeared, and whispers sharpened into judgment. Outside, I sat in silence, steady as stone. This wasn't vengeance, it was reality. And reality was a harsher teacher than I had ever been. The clinking of silverware and murmur of whispers filled the ballroom as the last trays of food were wheeled away. For a few strained minutes, the string quartet tried to mask the growing unease, their bows gliding across strings with forced elegance. But even music can't drown out humiliation. The first note of silence struck when a technician in a plain black shirt walked briskly toward the corner where the sound equipment was set up. He exchanged hushed words with the musicians, then began unplugging cords with deliberate precision. One by one, the amplifiers went dark, microphones powered down, and the graceful hum of violin and cello screeched to an awkward halt. The quartet looked at each other confused before lowering their instruments. Emily spun toward them, her voice pitched too high. "Why did you stop playing? Keep going." The oldest violinist shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Our contract was canceled. Without payment authorization, we can't continue." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave breaking against shore. Guests clutched their champagne flutes, frozen mid-sip, as the festive energy evaporated into a heavy quiet. The chandeliers still gleamed above, but without music, the ballroom felt cavernous, exposed. Michael stormed across the room, his polished shoes striking the marble floor. "This is absurd," he snapped. "We hired you for the evening. You can't just leave in the middle of our reception." The technician didn't flinch. He wound cables, neatly packed them into black cases, and replied evenly, "Sir, authorization for services was revoked at 4:30. We have no choice." The finality of his words cut deeper than any violin's note could. Emily's hands trembled as she tried to regain composure. She forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. There must be some mistake. My father wouldn't. Her voice caught, and she faltered, unable to finish the sentence. Even she didn't sound convinced anymore. The guests weren't convinced either. Whispers grew sharper, more pointed. Isn't her father the man they kicked out earlier? I heard he paid for the whole thing. Good Lord, they told him to leave, and now this. The gossip swirled, feeding on itself like a fire that no one could control. Emily's perfect image, built over years of appearances and practiced smiles, was crumbling in real time, and every guest had a front-row seat. Michael's jaw tightened as he scanned the room, his eyes landing on Emily with a glare that spoke volumes. He wasn't just angry at the chaos, he was humiliated. His expensive tuxedo, the silk flowers, the lavish hall, all of it was unraveling because of one truth: their fairy tale had been bankrolled by the very man they had dismissed. And now the soundtrack of that fairy tale had been silenced. From my truck, I pictured the moment clearly, though I didn't need to see it. Weddings are built on illusions, music, flowers, food, and laughter. Remove the illusion, and all that's left is reality. For Emily, reality was settling in with brutal clarity. And for me, the silence in that ballroom was sweeter than any melody. The ballroom that had once pulsed with laughter and polished elegance now felt hollow, like a stage where the props were being hauled off mid-performance. Orchids gone, dinner gone, music gone. All that remained was the sharp edge of whispers and the sound of reputations cracking. Emily stood in the center of it all, her $12,000 gown shimmering under chandeliers that now only highlighted her fragility. Her hand trembled as she pulled out her phone, the glow of the screen casting shadows across her pale face. She dialed frantically, my name flashing again and again across my own dashboard, each ring echoing in the silence of my truck. I let it buzz. 10 calls, 11, 12, each unanswered. She had never needed me so urgently, and never had I been so calm in ignoring her. Michael hissed at her through clenched teeth, his voice audible to the guests closest to them. Fix this, Emily. Now. My family is watching. His polished composure was gone, stripped bare like the tables where orchids once stood. I'm trying, she stammered, her thumb shaking as she redialed. Dad, please. Pick up. Her voice cracked, desperation spilling out for the first time. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, embarrassed for her. Others watched with the cruel fascination people reserve for scandals unfolding in real time. Emily's world, once perfectly curated for appearances, was disintegrating petal by petal, note by note, dollar by dollar. The venue coordinator approached cautiously, a phone pressed to her ear. Mrs. Anderson, she said softly. I've just spoken with our accounting department. All payments for today originated from a single account, James Clark. That account holder has revoked authorization for every transaction. Emily's eyes widened, her throat tightening. For a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to beg me to read just one more story before bed. Vulnerable. Helpless. But that innocence had long since hardened into entitlement, and now entitlement had abandoned her. Her voice rose shrill against the oppressive quiet. This can't be happening. He wouldn't do this to me. But the silence that followed told her what she didn't want to admit, and in that ballroom believed exactly that. They had seen me turned away at the door. They knew the wedding bore my fingerprints, every flower, every flute of champagne, every note of music. And they knew Emily had dismissed me anyway. She staggered toward Michael, clutching his arm as though it were a lifeline. Please say something. Fix this. Michael didn't move. His lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes flashing with anger he didn't bother to hide. I can't fix your father. He spat quietly, but loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time in years, Emily looked small, smaller than the girl I remembered on the playground swings. She clutched her phone again, dialing with trembling fingers, pleading into the void. And still, I didn't answer. Some lessons can't be explained. They have to be lived. From my truck in the far corner of the lot, I watched the chaos unfold like a storm I'd forecasted days in advance. Staff wheeled out trays of untouched food. Florists carried orchids in plastic tubs like stolen treasure. Musicians packed cases, their polished shoes squeaking against the marble floor. Each removal was another stone knocked loose from the tower Emily had built on borrowed foundations. But as the ballroom unraveled, my mind traveled backward, sifting through years like old photo albums. I remembered the first time I held Emily after Sarah died, her small body trembling against my chest, as she asked for a mother I couldn't give her. I had promised myself then that I would never let her feel the absence of love, no matter the cost. That promise had shaped every decision since extra shifts, missed vacations, living smaller so she could live larger. Yet here I was watching her crumble in silk and pearls because she had learned the wrong lesson. I had taught her that love meant sacrifice, but she had twisted it into entitlement. Somewhere between braces I paid for and spring break trips to Cancun, she stopped seeing my giving as love and started seeing it as obligation. And the tragedy wasn't that I gave too much. The tragedy was that she had never learned how to give back. My phone buzzed again, her 15th call in less than an hour. I let it ring, the vibration steady against my palm. The man in that ballroom was no longer just her father. I was now the reckoning she had invited the moment she told me I didn't belong. I thought of the years of meticulous record-keeping tucked away in my home office folders, labeled education, transportation, housing, personal expenses. Each payment documented, each sacrifice preserved in ink and paper. I had built my company with contracts and accountability. Why had I let my daughter escape both tonight? That would end. Emily thought this was about a wedding collapsing. She didn't yet see that it was only the beginning. Her world wasn't built on Michael's wealth or her social circle's approval. It was built on me. And I had just shown her what happened when that foundation was withdrawn. Inside, I imagined her clutching her phone, eyes darting, voice cracking as guests whispered. Michael's glare, his pride wounded, his perfect image fractured. That ballroom was no longer a celebration. It was a courtroom, and every guest was a witness to the verdict without her father's sacrifice. Emily's world was nothing but smoke and mirrors. I leaned back in my seat, steady, resolute. This wasn't revenge, it was education, delivered in the only language she had ever understood: consequences. By sundown, Emily would know what she had thrown away. And by tomorrow, she would face something far harsher than embarrassment: accountability, measured in dollars and years. The wedding had been just the opening act. The real reckoning was still to come. That night, when the noise of the ruined wedding finally faded from my thoughts, I sat alone in my home office, surrounded by silence. The house had grown old with me, wooden floors creaked. The furnace hummed faintly, but the quiet felt different. It felt purposeful, as though the walls themselves knew something long overdue was about to begin. I pulled open the filing cabinets lining the wall, each drawer neatly labeled, each folder carrying the weight of decades. This wasn't revenge, I whispered to myself as I stacked papers on my desk. This was an audit. The first folder bore the name Riverside Academy. 12 years of tuition statements, each stapled neatly to report cards. $8,000 a year when Emily started, rising to 12 by the time she graduated. I did the math again, though I knew it by heart, $126,000 for elementary and high school. Each receipt wasn't just money spent, it was nights I skipped dinner, months I postponed equipment upgrades for the business hours I worked overtime while other men rested. Next came Northwestern University. That folder bulged with dorm contracts, meal plan invoices, tuition bills, and receipts from essential trips abroad. $52,000 a year for 4 years, $200,000. Add housing, sorority dues, spring break in Cancun, and a summer program in Italy, and the total climbed to $284,000. I remembered Emily's voice back then, sweet but insistent, "Dad, this trip is essential for networking. Everyone in my program is going." I had wired the money without hesitation, believing her future was worth it. I turned to the transportation folder. First car, a Honda Civic at $18,000. She hated it. Everyone else drives BMWs, she complained. Second car, BMW 3i at $28,000. Third car at 25, BMW X3, $35,000. Each car came with insurance premiums, maintenance bills, registration fees. I stacked them neatly, adding another $75,000 to the growing total. Housing support filled another file. 3 years in a Lincoln Park apartment after college, $2,800 a month. I'd covered rent, utilities, even the credit card bills when her spending outpaced the generous allowance I already provided. That folder alone added up to $125,000. And then the wedding. Invoices for Ecuadorian orchids, catering deposits, ballroom rental photography, a gown worth more than a year's mortgage. $147,000, all gone the moment I made those calls. I leaned back, staring at the mountain of paper now spread across my desk. Education, $410,000, transportation, $75,000, housing, $125,000, personal expenses, $180,000, wedding, $147,000, nearly $937,000 in 25 years, almost $1 million, and not once had she asked what it cost me. Not once had she thanked me. I poured myself a cup of coffee, steam curling upward like the ghosts of past sacrifices. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about clarity. I had allowed my daughter to live like royalty while I played the servant. That ended tonight. I began drafting a spreadsheet, column headers clicking into place beneath my fingers: date, description, amount, category, running total. 25 years of fatherhood reduced to data points, and for the first time, I wasn't ashamed. Tomorrow, Emily would learn that every choice has a price, and I had the receipts to prove it. Morning light crept through the blinds as I packed the mountain of documents into a leather briefcase. The papers weighed heavy, but not nearly as heavy as the years behind them. Each folder was a chapter of sacrifice, and today they were no longer sentimental keepsakes. Today, they were evidence. By 9 o'clock, I sat across from Margaret Richards, one of Spokane's sharpest attorneys. Her silver hair framed a face carved by decades of courtroom battles. She spread the folders across the polished mahogany table, scanning the spreadsheets I had prepared with a speed that told me she'd done this many times before. "Mr. Clark," she said finally, looking up with eyes as sharp as a scalpel, "your record-keeping is extraordinary. This isn't the kind of documentation most parents keep." "I'm not most parents," I replied flatly. "I built a business from nothing by tracking every nail, every invoice. I wasn't about to raise a daughter without keeping just as careful an account." Margaret nodded. "Good. Because what we have here is strong enough to reclassify these so-called gifts as financial support subject to recovery." Given the pattern, escalating expenses, zero contribution from her consistent expectation of payment, it paints a clear picture of dependency without reciprocity. She tapped the spreadsheet. Nearly $937,000 over 25 years. That's not parental generosity anymore. That's a promissory debt waiting to be enforced. I sipped the coffee she'd offered, letting her words sink in. Debt. Enforced. It sounded cold, transactional, but maybe that was the point. Emily had turned love into transaction long ago. I was just speaking her language now. What are my options? I asked. Margaret leaned back. We'll begin with a formal demand letter. It will itemize every expense complete with supporting documents and request full repayment within 30 days. If she ignores it or contests, we proceed with civil litigation. The court will see the pattern. They don't look kindly on entitled dependents who abuse financial support. And if she paints me as a bitter father trying to punish his daughter, then we counter with facts, Margaret said crisply, sliding a hand over the folders. You have 25 years of receipts. She has assumptions. Judges favor evidence, not entitlement. By noon, the draft was ready. Official letterhead, legal phrasing, no sentiment, just cold arithmetic. 937,000 dul, due within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Margaret read it aloud once more, her voice steady as steel. I signed my name at the bottom, my pen moving with surprising ease. For 25 years, I had signed checks for Emily tuition, rent cars, dresses, vacations. Today, I signed something different. A boundary. Margaret gathered the papers into a neat packet. We'll have this couriered to her hotel this afternoon. Signature required. That creates an official record of receipt. As I walked out of her office, briefcase lighter, I felt something I hadn't in years control. My love for Emily hadn't died, but my willingness to be used had. That afternoon, when Emily opened that envelope, she wouldn't just be looking at numbers. She'd be staring down 25 years of her own reflection, documented undeniable, and finally carrying a price tag she could no longer ignore. By Sunday evening, I received confirmation that the courier had delivered the packet to the Spokane Grand Hotel Room 1247, signed by Emily Clark Anderson. I pictured her face when the front desk clerk called to announce a delivery, her assumption that it was some trivial vendor paperwork. Then Michael tearing it open, arrogance in his stance, melting into disbelief as he read the first line, $937,000 repayment demanded within 30 days. The calls started within the hour. Emily's name flashed on my phone again and again, 12 times in a single afternoon. I didn't answer. Her voicemails grew increasingly frantic. Dad, what is this? This can't be serious. Then, 900,000, that's impossible. And finally, her voice breaking. Please call me. Michael's family's asking questions I can't answer. But by Monday morning, Emily changed tactics. She had always been quick to adapt when cornered. If she couldn't win privately, she would fight publicly. It started with a Facebook post. Her wedding photo gown, flawless smile, radiant, paired with a lengthy caption dripping with wounded innocence. I never imagined my own father would destroy my wedding day. He walked out, canceled every payment, and is now demanding nearly $1 million from his only daughter. I don't understand how a parent could do this. Please pray for us. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. 200 shares, then 500. Comments poured in. That poor girl, abandoned by her own father. What kind of man ruins his daughter's wedding? Money can't replace love. Michael's family connections fueled the fire. Their social circle in Spokane's business community whispered about my supposed instability. Local Facebook groups repeated the story with added dramatics. Spokane businessman sues his daughter for wedding costs. Each retelling grew more grotesque, turning me into a villainous caricature of greed. By noon, my phone buzzed with calls not from Emily, but from business partners. Bob Martinez, a man I'd worked with for 2 decades, spoke cautiously. James, I'm hearing troubling things online. People are saying you've lost your mind, that you're going after Emily for money. Is everything all right? 3 more calls followed. Concerned voices, careful questions about my state of mind. In a city like Spokane, reputation was currency, and Emily had just launched a full assault on mine. Sitting in my office phone buzzing relentlessly, I realized she had learned more from me than I'd thought. She understood leverage. If she couldn't pay the debt, she would try to make me pay in reputation. She would weaponize sympathy, painting herself as the victim and me as the cruel father. But Emily had miscalculated one thing. In construction, you don't build on appearances, you build on foundations. And mine was 25 years of meticulous records, bank statements, and sacrifice documented down to the penny. Her weapon was gossip. Mine was truth. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the folders lined neatly across my desk. If she wanted a war of perception, then tomorrow I'd give her something stronger than rumors. I'd give her proof. By Tuesday morning, Emily's post had become the talk of Spokane. Headlines sprouted across local feeds. Father sabotages daughter's wedding and construction tycoon demands $1 million repayment. Her version of the story painted me as a bitter, vengeful old man who couldn't handle being excluded from a glamorous event. For a moment, I could almost admire her speed. She had turned social media into a courtroom, and she thought the jury would be on her side. But in real court, evidence decides cases, and I had evidence stacked higher than the chandeliers she adored. I called Margaret Richards, my lawyer, and told her it was time. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Once we go public, you can't take it back." "Emily already made it public," I replied. "I'll just show them the truth." By 9 a.m., I had uploaded 25 years of documentation across every platform Emily had poisoned with her story. A professional statement headed the release: financial documentation, 25 years of support. Attached were scanned bank statements, invoices, tuition receipts, car purchases, housing support, and the wedding payments, all categorized, totaled, undeniable. Nearly $937,000 in black and white. The post wasn't emotional. No finger-pointing, no bitterness, just numbers neatly organized, each dollar tied to a sacrifice. Alongside the documents, I posted photographs of Emily throughout her life, spelling B champion at 12, smiling with braces at 14, grinning beside her BMW at 19. Each photo was captioned with the cost that made it possible. Private school tuition, $12,000, BMW 320i, $28,000. Study abroad in Italy, $8,200. The effect was immediate. Where Emily's post had garnered sympathy, mine commanded respect. Comments began shifting. I had no idea he paid for everything. 937 Lijon. Over 25 years. That's not parenting, that's a lifetime investment. No wonder he finally said enough. Business partners called again, but their tone was different now. Tom Bradley, who ran Bradley Electrical, said, "James, I saw the records. My kids are in college, and I'm paying maybe $15,000 a year. You spent 4 times that. No one can say you didn't do your duty." Even Bob Martinez, who had doubted me earlier, admitted, "I owe you an apology. I see the truth now. She's been living like royalty while you carried the load." By noon, local news stations picked it up. The Spokane Business Journal ran a headline, "Parental Sacrifice or Entitlement, Nearly $1 million in Support Documented." Anchors didn't need to editorialize. The figures spoke for themselves. Meanwhile, Emily's Facebook post shriveled under the weight of evidence. Comments once full of sympathy now bristled with rebuke. "You humiliated your father, and now cry victim. He gave you everything, and you told him he didn't belong." The tide had turned. I sat at my desk, the silence of my house broken only by the buzz of supportive messages and the hum of the furnace. For years, I had been invisible, the man behind the curtain, funding her every whim. Now the curtain was gone, and the truth stood center stage. Emily thought reputation was a game. But in this city, credibility belongs to those who can prove their story. And I had just proven mine. By Wednesday morning, the fallout had spread beyond Emily. The Anderson family, Michael's proud lineage of old money and country club ties, found themselves dragged into a storm they couldn't control. For years, they had thrived on appearances, charity boards, business luncheons, whispered conversations, and golf carts. But appearances are fragile when truth smashes through like a wrecking ball. I didn't have to guess how the conversation unfolded in their home. Reports reached me quickly enough. Michael's father, a man who once shook my hand with the polite stiffness reserved for tradesmen, was furious. His phone had been ringing non-stop business partners, questioning why his son had married into a scandal, colleagues, whispering about financial deception. Acquaintances suggesting the Andersons had been duped by a spoiled bride. That morning, Emily called again. For the first time, I answered. Her voice was ragged, desperate. Dad, Michael's family is threatening annulment. They say I deceived them. They want him to walk away. I didn't raise my voice. Did you deceive them? Her silence was louder than any confession. Finally, she stammered, I didn't think it mattered. I thought you'd always. That's right, I interrupted. You thought I'd always cover the cost. You thought life was an endless open checkbook with my name on it. In the background, I could hear Michael sharp and impatient. Tell him we can fix this if he retracts the documents. Tell him to take it all down. His words carried none of the warmth a groom should have for his bride. It was business now, damage control. Emily's voice cracked. Dad, please. They're saying our marriage is built on lies. Michael hasn't spoken to me all morning. His parents won't even look at me. I let the weight of her words hang between us. Finally, I said, sometimes the truth destroys lies, Emily. Maybe it's time you learned what that feels like. By afternoon, whispers became headlines. Anderson family silent amid financial scandal. Local papers dissected the numbers I had published. Talk radio hosts debated parental responsibility versus adult entitlement. Michael's family couldn't silence it. The harder they tried, the louder the questions grew. At the Grand Hotel, Emily's world was collapsing. Guests who had toasted her only days earlier now avoided her in lobbies and restaurants. Sorority friends stopped answering calls. Even distant relatives politely distanced themselves. The image of the radiant bride dissolved into the reality of a woman standing in the ruins of a reputation she had built on borrowed foundations. For Michael, the pressure was unbearable. By the end of the week, he moved his belongings from their suite into his parents' home. I can't attach my name to this. He reportedly told Emily words as cold as the ballroom marble. You never told me your entire life was built on his money. You made me complicit in your deception. Emily was left standing alone, no flowers, no music, no husband, no allies, only the echo of her own choices. And me, I didn't rejoice. I didn't laugh. I simply sat at my desk, looking at the neatly stacked folders that told the story of 25 years. For once, it wasn't about the money. It was about truth. And the truth had finally leveled the playing field. 6 days. That's how long Emily's marriage lasted before the cracks split open beyond repair. Word reached me not from Emily, but through the grapevine of Spokane's business community, where gossip travels faster than any press release. Michael Anderson had packed his suitcase, left the Grand Hotel, and returned to his parents' estate. To him, the vows exchanged under chandeliers and orchids already stripped away meant less than his family's reputation. I imagined the moment clearly. Michael, standing stiff by the window, his face drained of color, as his father's voice thundered through the phone. This family cannot be tied to financial fraud. Michael's clipped responses, his hands shaking as he shoved clothes into a suitcase. And Emily still in shock, pleading, her voice cracking. "We can fix this, Michael. My father will calm down. He just needs time." But Michael had no patience for time. His words were final, sharp as glass. "Emily, stop. My family's name is in the papers. My colleagues are asking questions I can't answer. Your father published records showing you've lived off him your entire life. Do you know what that looks like?" Her silence must have been answer enough. Michael zipped his suitcase, each sound a nail in the coffin of their short-lived marriage. "You're a liability, Emily," he told her coldly. "I can't tie myself to this." When I heard those words, later repeated by someone who'd been close enough to listen, I didn't feel triumph. Only a heavy confirmation of what I'd known for years: entitlement eventually collapses under its own weight. Emily called me that night, her voice ragged with panic. "Dad, Michael's gone. He says his family won't stand by him if he stays married to me. Please, please help me." I closed my eyes, remembering the girl who once ran into my arms after school plays, begging me to lift her onto my shoulders so she could see the world taller. And now she was begging again, but not for joy, not for celebration, for survival. "Emily," I said quietly, "he didn't leave because of me. He left because of you. Because you built your life on borrowed ground and pretended it was your own." She sobbed, words tumbling over each other. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to fit in, to be enough for them. I thought if I kept everything perfect, if I kept smiling, no one would notice. They noticed I cut in. And when the facade cracked, they left you behind." For the first time in years, I heard the raw honesty in her voice, stripped of polish and entitlement. "Dad, I don't know what to do. I've lost everything." I didn't respond immediately, because the truth was she hadn't lost everything yet. But she was about to learn what losing everything truly meant, and how sometimes that's the only way to rebuild. Emily had always been surrounded by people, friends, from her sorority colleagues she entertained with my money, Michael's family, who adored her sparkle when it reflected well on them. But when the storm came, each one disappeared. That's the thing about fair-weather friends: when the skies darken, they scatter. By the end of the week, Emily called me again, her voice hollow. "Dad, no one's answering. Lisa blocked my number. Sarah told me she doesn't want to be involved. Even Aunt Margaret said maybe this is the lesson I need." Her tone broke on that last part, as though betrayal by family stung worse than friends fleeing. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let her words hang in the silence, forcing her to hear her own isolation. For 28 years, she had leaned on the cushion of my sacrifice. Now, without it, she was learning just how cold the world could be. At the Grand Hotel, the whispers grew sharper. Guests still lingering after the wedding now treated her like a pariah. Some refused to sit near her in the lobby. One woman even leaned to her husband and said, not quietly enough, "That's the bride whose father pulled the plug." Emily told me that herself, later through tears, humiliated by strangers' recognition. Michael's departure had left her more than alone. It had branded her. His family, in their polished cruelty, cut ties with surgical precision. A message from Michael's mother arrived on her phone. "Dear Emily, Michael needs to come home. We wish you the best moving forward. No anger, no comfort, just dismissal." She walked through that hotel in a wedding dress still hanging in the closet, but without a husband, without allies, without dignity. She had no money. Her credit cards were maxed, her accounts drained. I had stopped the flow. And for the first time in her life, there was no backup, no father ready to bail her out before the bill came due. I imagined her sitting on the edge of the hotel bed phone, clutched in her hand, staring at my number like it was both a lifeline and a sentence. She had dismissed me at the door of her wedding, stripped me of belonging. Now she sat stripped of everything else, realizing too late that I had been the only foundation holding her world steady. She left me another voicemail that night. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Dad, I don't know where to go. I can't pay for this room. I can't face Michael's family. Everyone hates me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, just tell me what to do." I listened, but I didn't respond. Not yet. Solitude is a harsh teacher, but sometimes it's the only one that works. Emily needed to sit in that silence to feel the weight of the consequences she had always pushed onto someone else. For the first time in her life, Emily Clark was completely alone. It was late on a rainy Thursday night when my phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it, but something about the persistence of the call made me pause. The screen glowed with her name, Emily. For a moment, I just stared, remembering the first time she ever called me on her own phone, at 15, nervous and excited, asking if she could stay late at a friend's house. Back then, my answer had been easy. Now it was anything but. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Her voice came through broken and shaking. "Dad." Just that one word, but it carried more weight than any accusation, any dismissal. It was no longer sharp or entitled. It was raw, pleading, almost childlike. "I don't know where to start," she whispered. "I've lost everything. Michael left me. His parents won't even speak to me. My friends won't return my calls. I don't have money for the hotel. I don't have anything." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. For years I had filled the silence with answers, solutions, checks. Tonight I wanted her to hear the emptiness of her own words. Finally I asked, "Do you understand why this happened?" Her breath hitched, then slowly, haltingly, the truth began to spill out. "Because I treated you like a bank account instead of a father. Because I never thanked you. Because I pushed you out of my life when all you ever did was give me everything. I was selfish, entitled, and cruel." Her voice cracked on the last word. For the first time in decades, she wasn't just admitting a mistake, she was confessing her character. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. The little girl who once whispered, "You're the best daddy in the world." The young woman who had traded gratitude for expectation. And now the broken bride, stripped of pretense, admitting she had been wrong. "I saw the records you published." She continued, sobbing. "Almost $1 million. I never even asked how you managed it. I just took. And when you showed up at my wedding, I told you to go away. I don't know how I became this person." Her words landed heavy, not because they hurt. They had already done that, but because they were finally honest. "What do you want from me now?" I asked, my voice steady. "I want to change," she said. "I want to earn your respect. I want to become the daughter you deserve. But right now, I just need help surviving long enough to prove I can." The silence stretched. She waited for my verdict the same way contractors once waited for my signature on million-dollar deals. This was no different. Her life, her future rested on my terms. For the first time in years, I didn't see the entitled woman who dismissed me. I saw the daughter I'd raised, stripped of illusions, standing on the edge of adulthood at last. And for the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, there was hope. Her plea hung in the air, fragile as glass. I had heard Emily beg before for cars trips, clothes privileges. But this was different. There was no polish in her tone, no entitlement hiding behind charm. It was raw, desperate, and strangely sincere. For the first time in years, she wasn't asking for more, she was asking for a chance. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the folders still spread across my desk. They weren't just numbers anymore. They were my proof of love and my proof of her waste. If I gave her another lifeline without rules, she'd slip right back into old habits. No. This time had to be different. Emily, I said slowly, my voice firm but calm, if I help you, there will be conditions. Strict ones. And if you fail them, you're on your own. Her breath hitched. Anything, Dad. I'll do anything. You'll find employment within 2 weeks, I began. I don't care if it's waiting tables, cleaning offices, or stocking shelves. Pride is a luxury you can't afford anymore. I understand, she whispered. No requests for money for 6 months, none. You will live on what you earn, and you will learn what it means to make choices within limits. Yes, I can do that. And one more thing, I said. We'll talk once a week. Not as father and dependent daughter, but as 2 adults. If you want my respect back, you'll earn it through honesty and accountability. There was silence broken only by the sound of her quiet sobs. Finally, she said, I want that. I want to be someone you can respect. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of my decision. Then I opened my banking app, my finger hovering over the transfer option. I'll send you $1,000. That's enough for the hotel for 1 week and basic groceries. After that, you're on your own. Her sob caught, but this time it wasn't despair, it was gratitude. Dad, thank you. I know I don't deserve this, but I won't let you down. Not again. You're right, I said firmly. You don't deserve it. But everyone deserves one chance to grow up, even if it's at 28. For the first time in years, the words I love you, Dad, sounded different. Not rehearsed. Not tied to a request. Genuine. And though my heart ached from years of betrayal, I allowed myself a flicker of cautious hope. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office, staring at the lamp's glow on the stacks of documents. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. My daughter had finally hit bottom, and maybe, just maybe, she was ready to climb. The transfer cleared within minutes. $1,000, barely a fraction of what I had once poured into her life in a single week. And yet for Emily, it was different this time. I could hear it in her voice when she called back to confirm she'd received it. No entitlement, no demands, just a quiet trembling. Thank you. For years, she had lived like a princess in a castle I built, never asking who laid the bricks or how much it cost. Now, for the first time, she was standing outside the walls, cold and exposed, realizing survival meant effort. I imagined her walking to the front desk, paying the bill with her own trembling hands, and for once feeling the weight of money as more than numbers on a screen. That night, I sat at my desk, the spreadsheet still glowing on my computer. $937 stared back at me, a lifetime of sacrifice quantified. But for the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. Instead, I felt clarity. Parenting hadn't failed, it had been incomplete. Love without accountability breeds entitlement. Now at last, Emily was learning accountability. The following morning, my phone buzzed with a text from her. I applied for 2 jobs today. I'll keep you updated. Short, simple, without excuses. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd ever gotten before. By evening, another message came. Do you think I should take a waitressing job if it's offered? Even if it feels beneath me, I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but relief. She was finally asking the right questions. Yes, I typed back. Beneath you is where growth begins. For the first time in years, our exchange didn't feel like a transaction. It felt like a conversation. I won't pretend I trusted her completely. Change doesn't happen overnight, and scars don't fade in a week. But as I sat in the quiet of my house, I thought about Sarah, about the promise I made her. Maybe this was what she had wanted all along, not a daughter shielded from hardship, but one who could stand on her own 2 feet. Emily had told me she wanted to earn back my respect. That would take time. But time was something I still had, and for the first time I felt it might be worth giving again. She ended our call that night with a phrase I hadn't heard in years: "I love you, Dad." And though I didn't say it back immediately, not yet, I let the silence stretch, holding the words in my chest like a fragile seed. If nurtured, maybe it would grow. For 25 years, I had given Emily everything except the one thing she needed most: boundaries. Now she was finally learning what they meant. The wedding was over, the facade was gone, but perhaps, just perhaps, the real beginning of her life had arrived. Looking back now, I realize the wedding was never just about flowers, champagne, or a gown worth thousands of dollars. It was about truth that had been buried beneath years of sacrifice and silence. For 25 years, I believed love meant shielding Emily from hardship. But what I gave her was comfort without responsibility, and in doing so, I mistook giving for parenting. The disaster of that wedding, the humiliation she faced in front of her friends and husband, was the first time she had to face life without me carrying the burden. It wasn't easy to watch my daughter fall. No parent dreams of seeing their child abandoned, alone, and penniless. Yet sometimes the harshest lessons are the ones that finally sink in. By letting her stumble, I gave her the one gift I had always withheld: accountability. To every parent listening, if you're raising children who demand without gratitude, who treat your sacrifices like obligations, stop and think. Love should not be measured only in what you provide, but also in the respect your children show in return. So let me ask you, have you ever faced betrayal from your own family after giving them everything? How did you handle it, and what lesson did it teach you? Share your story in the comments. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance we leave isn't money, it's wisdom. Thank you for listening.